Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 13. It's called The Masterpiece Society. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. I would describe this one as a very, very, very mediocre episode, which almost claws its way back into interesting territory in the last 10 minutes. I don't know if it quite gets there. But
I think it has interesting ideas throughout the whole episode.
Yes.
That I've seen done better elsewhere.
Yeah, it's called Gattaca. Yes, Gattaca is a good movie. Yes, I concur with this.
Yeah. I didn't want to just go straight in and call it low-rent Gattaca, but it was one of my first thoughts about 10 minutes in.
But I will say that there is kind of a pivot, because they kind of solved the key problem that they've got in the episode, which is this, solar thingamajig is going near the planet and it's going to cause chaos, so this colony's all going to die, and that's all very well. The problem is, though, is that the people on the planet are genetically engineered to all be part of a genetic pool, so that they're kind of perfect. There's a scientist, there's a handyman who's really good at being a handyman. Everyone's engineered to be the best at what they are. The leader's engineered to be a leader. So it's kind of like a less... Obviously, both Trek's delved into, perfect genetics and all that before. I mean, Khan and all that business. This is a more, less violent, turnout to it. This is more an exploration of, okay, this society and this little bubble's been formed and they exist this way, but what happens once they interact with the outside world? Now that they've been part of this bubble for 200 years, they're on, I think it said the 8th generation they're on now of this society.
Something like that, yeah.
So what happens once they start to interact with others? But they have to, because they're going to die anyway. If I have a sort of just a little critique before I get to sort of the main problems as to why it's kind of a mediocre episode, it's that even towards the end, when they're talking about how interacting with this society was just as dangerous as that solar fragment, whatever it was going to be. Well, be that as it may, it was definitely going to murder them all. You still had to do something.
I think, just to jump ahead to essentially the very final scene, where Picard is saying, final directive, it kind of should have been in play here. We didn't, because they were humans and, they had that ability to contact us, but the society, it wasn't fair to them. And I get where he's coming from, but yes, that by the end of the episode, the society is destroyed, essentially, as a society. But the people aren't. Yeah. And if they'd just done nothing, well, both would be dead.
They'd just all be dead. So, basically, they had to accept that their society was done no matter what. It was either we all die, or we have to change a little bit and be something a little different. And that's your two choices. But once they solve the key problem and it becomes, oh no, wait, some of these people want to leave. Once that debate came into it, I'm like, okay, this is starting to feel like it could. I can see where the good episode could have been here now, and I started to like some of the debate, and I like that it wasn't like a clean, because the clean ending would be that they somehow convince everyone to stay, right? But they didn't do that. They still had people wanting to leave, and they
convince everyone to leave.
Yeah, but they don't. These people do leave, and the leaders of this place are terrified of this, because the whole idea is that there's now gaps in the perfect genetic pool. Now their scientist is gone. Now their engineers are left.
There's just not enough people essentially left to maintain the balance that they've got.
So it's a whole thing, and of course you have the idea that because there's two guest stars in this, both of whom I recognize because they're in separate episodes of Babylon 5. Although the black guy, what's his name? Ron Canada. He's got a great name, Ron Canada. He's got a really nice suit in this as well. He's got like a blue suit with like a purple jumper. It's very 80s. Don't get me wrong. It's just which is notable. This is not an 80s episode. This is an 80s episode, but that's okay. Leftovers happened, and also they're meant to be like this weird bubble colony that had their own fashions.
It feels fine that they're a little left behind.
Yeah, that's part of the whole premise. But the whole thing with him at the start is that when our main dude Connor, his name was Connor, right, or something Connor?
That was his surname, yeah.
Yeah. He's like talking to Picard, and they're reluctant to even communicate because they don't want outside interference. They don't want to be polluted by the outside world. But in the entire time, as Picard's explaining how much danger they're in and he's convincing the leader, the whole time Ron Canada's in the background. Like, I love just how expressive he is and how, like, he's reacting to it. I was like, you're considering agreeing to this? What? What? Come down here? Interact with us? What? Like, he's so expressive in the background as he's pacing back and forth.
I'll be honest, I didn't notice it as much because I was too busy trying to figure out who the main one reminded me of.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, is it an actor? Like, I was like, he reminds me of someone. And it was mainly his side profile. And there was a lot of him, stood facing the side in this episode. So it was like coming up a lot. And I'm pretty sure you will probably not get this done, but I'm pretty sure it's footballer Gary Neville. I'm pretty sure that's who I'm thinking of when I see him from the side. And it was bugging the hell out of me for like most of the episode.
Yeah, I'm okay not getting that.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it's probably a niche amount of our audience who will.
Yeah. But the whole thing is that he immediately is very adamant he doesn't want to interact with the outside world because he's concerned that there will be this pollution, if not literal pollution of genetics, which, there is kind of going to be in a way because someone does get frisky with someone, but even just the idea that they're going to influence people and tempt people into being curious and want to like go out and explore the universe, and that there is because they're all amazed. Like if I give it a compliment, is that they do really make a good point of having everyone who we interact with be super impressed at the transportation. Like when they beam down, everyone is like ooh and ah, and
yeah, it's not like they're a primitive species or anything like that.
Oh, not at all.
They've got reasonable tech, and their scientist has ideas that are on the level with Geordi, but they've never needed this, so the idea of it never struck them, and it seems really impressive. Yeah,
that's one of those little touches that's like a good detail in an otherwise kind of dull episode. Is that little statement from Geordi is that the idea that necessity kind of leads to invention a lot of the time, and you never need to transport anywhere because you're all in this little bubble. So why would you have developed any way of transporting like this? You don't need it. You can walk everywhere in the space of 20 minutes. So why would you bother?
It would be pointless.
Maybe I'm over exaggerating. Maybe it's bigger than that, but you know what I mean. Like it's relatively speaking quite enclosed.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they said there's only like 1,000 people there or something, which is
so
nothing for a small village.
So yeah, like the ideas are fine, but I think the main problems with this is that a lot of the runtime, especially in the first 2/3, is heavily a kind of shoddy romance with Troy and our man Connor, who, and honestly, their chemistry is kind of non-existent. He's meant to be infatuated with her because she's new, she's different, and she thinks differently to everyone there. The idea that even he's tempted by an outsider because they are different and like a fresher breath air, and she's intrigued by him because like no one needs therapy here, so she's like, oh man, there's like I'm not picking up any bad feelings. Everyone is content. This is like vacation hotspot for me. And it's like, okay, all right. Like on paper, I get why you appeal to each other, but like all of the actual interactions and the kind of the first glances, it's all a bit hammy. It's all a little bit like suggestive. The way they look at each other, the way you'll say something.
So what you're saying is it's a Troy romance episode.
It's not entirely a Troy romance episode. It does kind of like pivot away from it. That said, though, I took far too much enjoyment and satisfaction out of Troy having to confess this romance to Picard. This was amazing.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go to this.
This might be the standout scene of the episode, in all honesty, because the way she stops the turbo lift, she's like, Captain, I have to tell you something. And this is really hard because I may have made some poor choices in judgment, and I just started laughing after that line. And I think what gets me is because the episode, we saw them kiss, and she kind of tries to talk him out of it, but it kind of happens anyway, and it's really cheesy. There's the piano. I love how we compare it to Gattaca, but Gattaca also has like this perfect pianist scene. There's like a pianist in Gattaca who's like,
oh, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing in that is they're bred with like 12 fingers because you can only play this piece with 12 fingers because it's impossible with 10. But they're listening to the pianist, the local pianist. They've only got 1,000 people, but they have to have a pianist. So
hey, music's important.
Sure, yeah. I say he's the pianist. He's probably the one musician. He can probably play everything. He's a one-man band.
Yeah.
Why not? But we can still hear that playing as they're kissing, and there's like a sunset or sunrise behind them. It's not entirely clear that they're actually going to, get down and dirty with each other. Like, the awkwardness afterwards kind of suggests it, but it's not until this scene where she's like, I've had a relationship. I'm like, okay, it was more than a kiss. They definitely did something.
Pulled a Riker.
She pulled a Riker. Well, which is so funny, it was a swerve because I really genuinely thought, because when they introduced the engineer on the planet, it's this blonde woman, and like Riker and like Geordi and Troy walk in, I genuinely thought Riker was going to or more specifically, I thought she was going to like Riker. I thought Riker was going to walk in, she was going to be like, oh, who is this off planet slice of beef? Yeah. But especially in this case where it's only 1,000 people, she's probably literally met every man in the planet already.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
To some extent. So I think I was expecting something. So it kind of pivoted, and she was more oohing and ahhing at the engineering and the science. She was like, oh, what's all this fancy stuff? What's going on?
Geordi's visor. She's and she has like a moment where she's kind of. And again, it's kind of touching on that stuff we like about stories like Gattaca, which is the idea that if he were conceived on their colony, he would have just been erased before he was even allowed to develop past an embryo. Like, it would have been like, oh, he's going to be blind, so he doesn't get to exist. Yeah. And obviously, we have seen episode to episode for 5 seasons now how much he's contributed not only to Starfleet, but to the people around him, to the friendships he had, like everything. Also, can I I'm just realizing this now that I say this, but this might be the episode with the least amount of data in it I think there's ever been. I think he has one scene at the start where he's sitting and he says something about the readings, and that's it. You're right. That is all there is.
There is no data other than that one scene. That is really weird.
It is very weird. I mean, I'm not annoyed at that because every other cast member has these. Well, I mean, almost every other cast member has these episodes where they're just like, they get a line. They're in one scene. They're basically not there, but they're there for contractual reasons, basically.
Yeah, and it makes sense for them to be there, but and it would. I guess maybe from a narrative perspective, the reason why you don't want a lot of data in this is because if data goes down and they see an android, it's maybe. Obviously, yes, it would add to them being wowed at what's out there, but maybe it's just one element too much, to tackle. They want to focus on Geordi because he relates better to the story because he is a human with a disability, right? Obviously, it's one that they've got a technological way of dealing with now, but it's obviously it's related far more to what the themes of the episode are, and that's all fine. On paper, there's a lot of good things in here to explore, and we know there's good things in here to explore because we've seen it done in other things.
That's why I say it's full of great ideas. It's just mediocre.
And the other thing as well is that, like I say, once it becomes the decision, like, do we? Because when the debate comes up, it's like, okay, the engineer lady wants to leave. She even tries to fake a problem to make just so that everyone has to evacuate, which is a bit cheeky. But ultimately, it's like, no, she asked for asylum. And Picard and that sit down and they talk about it and say, well, she's a human with rights, and we can't just walk away from that. We can't just ignore her if she's wanting to leave. She has that right. But this is a colony, and they have this perfect gene pool, and this will remove someone from their whole sequence. And they mention as well that there's at least another half dozen, probably more, that are thinking about this. Yeah. Like all the engineers that were working, because when they sent down people to like reinforce their domes and whatnot, like.
Add some shielding nonsense.
Yes, other people want to leave. Like they've become curious and it becomes that idea. I think that core idea of like, and Picard kind of gets at this at one point when he's talking to Troy about like what they're like, and he kind of like admits his bias here, where he's like, I can never live like this. Like the unknown, like finding out who you are and discovering yourself. Like that's a part of what life is. And
I think the scientist woman calls him out on that as well during like when they're all gathered around outside and they're like, hey, let's give it 6 months, think it over. And she calls Picard out on it and be like, no, you literally travel, explore new stuff for a living every day. Why wouldn't we want to do that as well?
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting about it, is Picard goes down finally and speaks to the leader, and the leader admits that even he's been tempted because he's kind of fallen for Troy, and like part of what makes her so intoxicating is she's new and different, and she's not even, she's only half human, so she's even like genetically, it's not even that she's imperfect, she has differences in her, even more so than real life, but the imperfections are what make her so fascinating.
I do believe he uses that line at one point. He says, the imperfections.
It does.
Right?
That's why I went for that word specifically.
Yeah.
And Picard sort of says, "Look, I'll try and I'll help you try and talk them out of staying. I'll encourage them not to make any rash decisions, to think about it and make sure they understand what they're choosing to do. But ultimately, they are beings with rights." And they bring up that they're humans a lot, but ultimately we know that doesn't matter. Like if they were Klingons, if they were whatever race, the argument would still be the same. They're intelligent life. If they ask for asylum, if they ask for whatever, we can't turn them away. That's just like not who we are.
In many ways, this is kind of the same precursor idea as what happened in Discovery, right, with Saru.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and obviously there it was this idea that ultimately he'd made contact himself. He'd kind of like went ahead of everyone else, and so they accepted him alone. And this is kind of an interesting case where they had to interact, but their interaction in and of itself was this kind of, obviously it sounds really negative to use the word poison, but yeah, it kind of is this seed that spreads, and all of a sudden these ideas, and all of a sudden all these people who weren't part of the decision making 8 generations ago are like, there's a whole universe out there. I want to go out there and explore it. I want to, like, I'm supposed to, because the engineer, she says, I was designed to be the best engineer I can be, but I'm now seeing things that I have never thought of developing, and I want to like use that to be an even better engineer. I want to go and see what else is out there and like expand my knowledge, because there's all this, because ultimately when it comes to science and technology, like everything's built on what came before, and effectively by putting them into a bubble, in terms of like her mind and how she thinks, because she's an engineer and thinks about these things, she's been put in this weird handicap herself almost of how technology moves forward by only being able to like iterate on her own stuff or on the previous generations. It's a very streamlined line. And like a gene pool, the diversity of the different ideas and the different things from everywhere coalescing is kind of what makes things happen. It's what makes things different and evolve and be special and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot of interesting debates to be had, and I do like that ultimately it's like, well, we can't turn them away, so if this is what you're deciding, we have to accept you, and tough titty if the leaders don't like it, you're not keeping them here captive. And perhaps there's an interesting debate as well in the final scene about how it kind of applies to the Prime Directive, and Riker argues, well, they are human though, like this is a little bit different. It's like, yeah, but does it matter if they're a completely cordoned off colony who have not interacted with the Federation because they left before it kind of became a thing? Then at that point, do we treat them as a different life form? But Riker also points out, yeah, but we had to address the fact that they were going to be annihilated. That doesn't change because we know the outcome of this.
Yeah, like imagine if they had all this knowledge and they're making the choice again, and we're like, nah, we'll just let them try and figure it out themselves. Screw it if they all die. That would be weird.
Ultimately, I think it's a lesson that sometimes you're just pushed into an unfortunate corner where you have to do something, even if it technically isn't what you would ideally do, and you just kind of have to accept that. And I think if they did have all the knowledge beforehand, I still think they'd make the same choice. They would just feel better about it because they were able to make it with that information. But because they've had to kind of discover it after making some of these choices, there's a kind of a weird guilt that comes with it because you didn't make that choice with that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And in many ways, it's that no-win scenario, right?
Yeah.
That Trek loves, and it's no matter what they do here, the society is ruined. That it's not going to continue, but they might as well save their lives while they're at it. Which
in and of itself maybe even kind of proves that the idea of this type of colony in the first place is is flawed. That ultimately it's never going to work forever. The interaction with others eventually has to come. It just does. You can't be on an island forever.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I'll give it credit that this was a far more interesting conversation than for the first like 2/3 of the episode. I thought this was going to be barely 10 minutes long. We were going to complain about a crappy romance.
I think that's it. I think there's a lot to talk about because there are a lot of ideas.
especially especially in the last 10-15 minutes. Like that last 10-15 minutes really brings a lot of debates in.
Even before that, there's stuff where they're constantly like, oh, but the founding fathers wouldn't want this, and it's hard not to relate that to other arguments that that we're more familiar with. The idea of going, well, these people who lived a few hundred years ago, they set it up this way. It's like, yeah, but they couldn't perceive this, so maybe things have to change, and that's an argument that's used in this episode.
Yeah. If you go back and ask them, oh, if we're facing certain annihilation by this cosmic thing that's happening, should we just all die? Should we just all give it up? Like, I'm pretty sure their answer might be, well, no, this may be bend the rule here or there.
Yeah. Maybe use your own judgment a little bit. Don't be beholden to us old guys from 200 years ago.
Yeah, maybe we didn't predict a lot of the things that might happen one day, or couldn't have considered certain things.
Well,
always something to bear in mind, I think.
And in some ways, that's kind of what makes this episode more frustrating. In that, like I say, we've seen this, we know that this can be done better. It's got good ideas at its core, and it's just not very good. So it's more annoying than just the regular shit episodes. Because at least then I'm just like, yeah, you know what, you couldn't even do anything with this. Whereas this here, I'm like, it just needed some. A tighter script, a few more edits, some pacing differences. Bring that last 10-minute section about that debate. Bring that, maybe half the episode instead. I can see this being a great episode with a bit more work. It's annoying that it's not there.
Yeah, I would like to add something actually, because I was making fun of the Troy confessing to Picard scene, and I want to make it clear that I would think this scene would be just as funny if this was a Riker scene. Like, see if we had an episode where Riker slept with someone and it was like, oh wait, this might have been a kind of a dodgy thing to do because of the politics involved and the Prime Directive, and Riker had to come to Picard and say, I might have made a lapse in judgment. Like, I would also find that really funny. This is not just because it's Troy.
No, the idea of any of the senior crew having to be like, I may have boned someone, may have been a mistake.
I think it's funnier with Troy and Riker as a pair, because Troy, I mean, let's face it, Troy just gets made fun of, mainly because she has a lot of bad romance episodes, so her bad romance being something she has to confess is kind of funny. With Riker, it's kind of because he does seem to get a lot of action, and he seems to flirt with a lot of ladies, so it would be equally funny for that reason. I'm not saying it wouldn't be funny if, I don't know, Worf had... I mean, maybe, actually, that would be quite funny. Very funny. Captain, I may have made a lapse in judgment.
That'd be hilarious.
But I mean, I don't think it'd be that funny if Geordi or Crusher, some of the other characters, I think would just be a bit more muted. It'd be a bit more, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah,
they're a bit more normal.
Worf was a bad example.
Worf was a bad example because but Worf's just funny because he's Worf, and he's so Worf. But But yeah, I want to make that clear because I feel I never want to feel like the making fun of Troy comes from a weird sexist place, because it's not. It's a poor writing with her character and the plot she gets.
I was gonna say it's sexist in the sense that I think she's badly written, oftentimes because they don't know how to write women on this show.
Oh yeah, no, definitely the root of this problem is at the very least at the very least, or ignorant misogyny, if not, at the very least it's that, if not something more than that. But either way, the point is that the women characters on the show, of which we have two, really. I mean, we once had three, but one was lost to a puddle.
Long time ago.
But of the two characters we have, their plots don't tend to be written that well, and they often devolve into they have a romance plot, because that's what you do with a women character. You give them a romance plot, and it's not like the other characters don't get romance plots from time to time, but it does kind of feel like a lot of Troy and Crusher
they have a
episodes.
Higher percentage of
yeah, it seems to be the well they go back to over and over again because they don't know what to do. So I don't want that to come across as mean in that sense, but I did find it hilarious as a scene, her having to confess that. And maybe it's also because this idea of her admitting she's made a lapse in judgment, just because she makes a lot of lapses in judgment when it comes to her what she doesn't detect with her empathy skills.
Yes, she's not the most useful member of the bridge crew, is she?
No. Definitely not. Definitely not. Some of the ensigns honestly put in more.
Hey, at least they press the buttons.
more important duties than Troy does sometimes, which is a shame. But yes, so yeah. Anyway, there you go. That's the episode. A lot of good ideas. I think that I was ready to kind of throw this under the bus, because for all the good Gattaca-esque ideas of the society and the questions about like not letting people that do have disabilities exist and things like that, like those interesting hard-hitting questions feel almost just kind of too tame in the way it's presented in this episode. So for the first 2/3 of the episode, I was genuinely thinking I was going to come in here and call it like really mediocre at best and like really kind of shit on it. And then the last 10 minutes, like there was enough like, oh, we have to let these people like decide to leave if they want to, and like those debates that came in, I was like, okay, there's more good stuff here towards the end, but not enough to like drag it into like good territory overall, I would say. Never mind great, which it definitely has the potential with the ideas to be great, but hey.
Yeah, I'd say ultimately I watched this episode and I just felt like I wanted to go and watch Gattaca instead.
Gattaca is a fantastic film.
It's really good.
It's very, very good. Which, I mean, that's the other thing as well. I guess that's one of the things that felt kind of like almost like we're holding back a little bit, is they don't really address the idea that like the way they suggest it in this episode is that the people who are like bred to fill certain roles are just happy in those roles. Like, you know, in Gattaca, one of the main plot points is that the characters who are not like destined to live long, healthy lives are just kind of like, oh, you're given the shittier jobs because you're given the menial tasks because you're not important. This episode kind of implies that everyone who's in like any role, because someone's building things, so let's say like, you know, is the builder happy as a builder? It implies that he is, but maybe he's not. And this is not me suggesting that buildings. Some people like building. Like building's not a looked down upon profession by any means.
Does he want to be a builder,
yes.
Or is he just told he is a builder?
Yes, like he's just, you know, it's a skilled labor, right? Many people are quite happy with that. It pays fairly well, from what I understand. Very important thing, but you know, is there a janitor? Is he happy as a janitor? Like this is, you know, a fair question to ask, and I don't know if the episode addresses this. Like, is there people who have tasks that are less desirable? Like, it's one thing being told, oh, you're the best scientific mind, you're going to be you know, driving our technology forward. Like, at the very least, that you can see how that's appealing and exciting to a point. Admittedly, we find out that there's a ceiling to it because you're in this bottle, but that compared to some of the other tasks, like, you know,
this is a very upper class version of Gattaca, isn't it?
Yeah, it's upper class in the sense that it just ignores that there has to be like a lower class and doesn't really consider it.
I think that's something that, by shifting that debate of the episode at the end to be more of, you know, half the episode, you could have had Picard kind of look into that and investigate that side of it a bit more.
Like, are people happy? And like, yeah.
Yeah, we know that there's this whole crowd of people at the end who are wanting to leave. Well, what are these people like? Why are they asking questions? We know literally nothing about them.
And maybe it's a case where a lot of the more labor-driven tasks, they have like technology and androids or something to like do that. So there is no like animosity like that. Maybe the people who are building things are actually just the architects who are just putting into a computer and the computer's going do, you know, build. Like, maybe that's what's happening, and therefore there is no, like, everything's a very fulfilling upper tier version of every like skill set, right? There's no one like just hammering a nail into a board. It's like, no, it's an architect who's pressing some buttons to make it happen. And if that's the case, then fair enough, you can't. But even that's disappointing in the sense that you're kind of ignoring one of the more interesting elements of a society like this. So, yeah. And if you are genetically like breeding people who are just going to be content with certain things that are lower down the ladder, as it were, then
is that also kind of evil? Yeah,
that feels kind of malicious as well. So, again, there's some interesting questions that it just dodges.
Yeah,
by never addressing them. So, more interesting things to look into. Anyway, there you go. That is the episode. What are we looking at next time, I wonder? So that was the Masterpiece Society. Which even sounds villainous. The Masterpiece. It sounds like a villain team in a superhero comic. Like, you know, a bunch of villains get together. We're the Masterpiece Society.
does. Sounds like something out of a Bond film.
So the next episode is called Conundrum. And...
Data episode?
I will find out. We do have a returning... I just noticed that Ensign Ro Lorenz in this.
Okay.
Michelle Forbes' character. We liked her, so that's nice. So here's the description on IMDb. When an approaching alien ship wipes their memory, the crew struggle to put together what happened.
Have we not seen this like 6 times already?
We definitely had one that wasn't too long ago, and it was a pretty solid episode.
Yeah, that was the one where
Data remember, but no one else did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember that being quite good. So this,
and she was
to live up to that.
And she was in that episode, was she not? No, maybe she wasn't. I don't think she was. No, I'm thinking of the one where, there was quakes and stuff, and Picard was in the turbo lift. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
This is actually odd. I mean, at least maybe it feels different in the episode because this is just a description on IMDb, so let's not jump to conclusions. But it does sound oddly similar to a concept that we did not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
That said, it's got a fairly reasonable rating, so I mean, I wouldn't get too upset about it.
Let's not throw it under the bus just yet.
Yes. And we're not doing some weird thing where they aired the same episode again, because at least one of the images has a really distinct looking visual that we definitely didn't see before. So, yes, we'll see how it shapes out. But yes. Oh, maybe the point is here is though they know they've forgotten. Maybe it's not, because last time it was they had to slowly discover that time disappeared.
That's true. Yeah, maybe if they know from the start, they just don't know what they've forgotten.
Yeah. So maybe that's the key difference to start things off.
Different mystery, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. That's what's coming next time. Let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All those things help out a lot on YouTube. So please do hit the buttons. And of course, you can head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is not in complete control of a perfect gene pool.